Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Nom Watch Review, part of Nom Talk Network. On this show, we review the latest film drop or throwback celebrating a milestone while eating and drinking our favorite movie and snacks and drink. I am so excited to be back here because it's been such a long time. The last time I was on here, I've been a guest. It was actually Carolyn, you joined me for it. It was Basic Binges, and we did The Last of Us, and we love a Pedro Pascal, like we love him, but I also love a non-watch review. That was where I started, and I'm so excited to just be here, do it, and to just have some fun. So it's good to see you all. I'm your host, Jordyn Orozco, and right now I'm enjoying a wonderful little Nom Watch Mai Tai, as always, right? In my like little Corkscroll. And I made it was a Instapot uh chicken marsala. So and it's
Ooh.
so good. So I'm gonna just be
Ooh.
like chomping on it all night, and it's wonderful and amazing. But enough about me. Let me introduce my guests. It's so good to see you all. Two of you we've had wonderful and amazing adventures with. The other one, it is so good to see you, so good to like meet you and all that stuff. Let's start with you, Carolyn. What are you enjoying? What are you drinking? What's going on?
So I'm this movie I'm excited for because I recently got back from Puerto Rico and I got to feed birds. And in honor of that, and it's a great picture, but in honor of that, I shall only hint at it, and you can't see it, but I have a bag of chicken wings.
Yeah.
But I have a bag of chicken wings and I'm being terrible, and I have Coke Move limited edition coconut soda. So it actually tastes pretty good. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it actually tastes pretty good. But I have that, and I have actual food this time around. But yeah, I got to feed the birds in Puerto Rico, and I'll tell you something.
Wait, so the Move edition of Coke is coconut?
Yeah, it's transformation flavor, but it's like sugary
Yeah.
coconut flavored.
Wow. So I had that the other day and I was like, this is like I had the Coke Zero version and I was like, it's too sugary,
Mm-hmm.
even for Coke Zero. And I was like, "Ugh." But my dad got it and he was like, it's good. And I was like, all right. So it was like a collab with Rosalia.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so cool. I'm glad I know what the flavor is now because I may try it again and be like, oh, this is good, but
Get the
still
get
too
the
sugary.
regular get the regular one. Even though Coke Zero is better for you, get the regular one. Trust me.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll just like have a little sip and see if
Listen.
it's too much and we'll try. And let's go to Jen. Jen, I am so mad I missed you this weekend. You were awesome. Mary saw you. You all took pictures. What's going
Yes.
on? What are you eating? What are you drinking on?
Well, I had to go down. I live in the mountains. I had to go down the hill to civilization for some errands. So I got some Raisin Cane's chicken strips in honor of tonight, but they didn't make it back up the hill with me due to traffic. I finished them all. So I did also wear a t-shirt. These are the murder birds. This is the meth falcon, the pocket robin, and
Love it.
the death parrot. So it's from a podcast, but I thought it was an appropriate shirt. And yeah, I've just been busy, just finished 4 days at WonderCon, working for the show and doing my cosplay stuff. I didn't sleep much and I ate like a rabid raccoon. So I'm trying to do a little better now after the fried chicken.
But we love rabid raccoons,
Yes,
and
they're
that's all
great.
I have to say.
There you go.
They're
Absolutely.
great. They're great.
I'm glad to be
Well,
back.
yes, it's good to see you. Good to like do this again. And last but certainly not least, Mikey, my new friend. What's going
Hey,
on? What are you drinking? What are you eating on?
funny enough, I'm also drinking a little Canes.
Oh my
Um,
God.
I just finished that up earlier, and yeah, having some of that, some sweet tea, and I just got done with WonderCon this weekend as well. It was a fun time. I missed all of you guys there. I'm sorry I didn't see any of you there, but it was a fun time inside watching panels and stuff. But yeah, it was a good time. Yeah.
So awesome. I'm so mad I didn't go. I'm so mad I had prior obligations, but it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. We're all gonna meet. That's gonna be wonderful.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you haven't caught on to the theme of what's going on tonight, we are talking about the 1963 version of The Birds, right? Alfred Hitchcock, classic film, right? I saw this film when I was super little, and my mom and me, like, we were watching it, and she was like, "Let's watch The Birds," and I'm like, "Okay, like, it's probably about like some cute little like birds, blah blah blah." And it turned into this like horror film that like is like a forever like non-ending film. Like it doesn't end happy. It's like, oh cool, they escape, but like, oh, like these birds, they're gonna like fuck you up wherever you go, right? And I loved this film as I got older into adulthood. And there's just so much to talk about it, right? So my early introduction to the film was my mom, right? Who was just like, yeah, you gotta watch this, blah blah blah. And me and my mom are super like old school movie buffs. Like we watch Lana Turner movies, we watch like um Mommy Dearest, like all that stuff, right? Like we will sit there and just watch these movies all day and like it's fine. And so when I watched this, I was like, it's super different, but it was super scary. And I was like, shit, I don't want to be anywhere near like birds. I don't want to be anywhere near like a group of birds, right? Like a murder of crows, like all of that, right? And so I feel like this movie was like pivotal in my upbringing when it came to horror films, right? Let's start with you, Mikey.
Mhm.
What was your introduction to this film? Like, how did you even like get to know about Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds?
So I think the very, very first time I ever heard about this was I was a kid and we did the Universal Studios tour, and that was like a big thing. They always like talk about it then. And then at the time also we were living in the Bay Area, San Jose, not San Francisco,
Oh,
but so like I started getting into like Hitchcock because he shot a lot of movies in the Bay Area. And then so I started like learning about the places that he shot. And I actually ended up once like in college, I went to go to a wedding that was in Bodega Bay area. So so I don't know, I got into Hitchcock like uh around like high school age,
Mm.
and I just started like following the rest of his movies. Birds was the first one though that I remember seeing in like I think Universal Studios, yeah, from the tour and stuff. I think they played
yeah,
the like the trailer or something
yeah.
where Tippi Hedren comes into the room and says like they're coming and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So I thought it was kind of cool. I never thought that it was as like like a lot of his movies are like straight up like psycho and horror like
Mhm.
type of
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
always, I always thought of it more of like it was just more of a slice of life kind of thing, because I mean
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff with her and Mitch, and her chasing down Mitch and stuff like that for the first half of the movie. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because everybody's introduction to this film is very different. And you're like how did it happen, right? Jen, let's go to you. What was your first introduction to this? How did you receive The Birds?
I so I grew up terrified of any movie called a horror movie, but I worked at Blockbuster, so I know
Yeah.
a lot about so many movies I've never watched. And The Birds was one of them where it was more like I like birds. I actually have a ton of bird feeders outside. I am currently trying to convince the ravens to bring me presents. And I don't
Mhm.
want to be afraid of these birds. So I didn't see it until I think I was in my 30s. But I really liked it and I love Hitchcock. And then and it's funny because I had this revelation listening to this podcast lately where he reads old ghost stories and one of them was The Birds and it's a short story by Daphne du Maurier, which I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Except right on the title card of the movie, it says that. And I'm like, I'm just not observant, apparently. The story is the characters in the story are very different to the characters in the movie. But it's still a very interesting list. Well, listen, I didn't read it. I listened. But no, and I actually have been to Bodega Bay as well. I have a friend that lives up in Santa Rosa in the Bay Area, and we're all into ghost hunting and paranormal, and that's actually how we all know each other. And a friend and I went to visit her years ago, and she's like, "Hey, let's take a little trip. She's a half hour away. We drove out. We saw the schoolhouse, which is actually, I believe someone actually lives there, and it's a museum as well, but it was closed when we went. And then we just drove around Bodega Bay. And I have a friend who passed away, oh gosh, it's been like 21 years. And her family had a home in Bodega Bay, and that was a place that was very special to her. So her ashes were spread there, and I was able to go to that beach where her ashes had been spread and kind of say my goodbyes. So it was a bittersweet trip. It was cool to see the stuff from the birds, but I got to have that like emotional connection. So seeing Bodega Bay in the movie when I was watching it again today, I was like, so it's that was my introduction. I was as an adult because I was a chicken shit little kid.
That's great. No, that's so awesome. And I love the fact that you have like a personal connection to like where this is supposed to be, right? And also like, just I don't know, it's great. It's great when like you have a movie and you're like, yeah, like this is it. This is what's going on. And this is how I love it, right? And so it's great. It's great. Carolyn, what was your first introduction to the film? How did you get introduced to the birds?
So, you and I actually have something in common in that we both have parents that are very into like old school movies and like classic films. And my mom and my grandmother loved Turner Classic Movies when it was on the air. And my mom was always a big fan of, because my mom was a film student and my bio dad was a film student. And so they were always putting things in front of me, and I saw the birds, but I didn't remember a lot of it until I saw the episode of The Simpsons where Maggie went to the daycare, and it was the birds parody, because all the babies were sitting there and they had to collect Maggie, and all the babies were doing the sucking noise like the birds with their cawing, and you saw the Alfred Hitchcock cameo, and I maybe in my late kid, early teens, and I was pointing at it, I was going, that's from the birds, that's from the birds. And my friends are like, what? And I'm like, no, it's a movie. They're making fun of Alfred Hitchcock. And they're like, the guy with the chocolate syrup. And I'm like, yeah, that guy. And so it fell. So that was that. And then like I was saying, I got back from Puerto Rico, and I went to Puerto Rico, and there was a park called Park de Palomas, and it's Park of the Doves. But there were pigeons, hundreds of basically tame pigeons, hundreds and hundreds of tame pigeons, and for $2 you could get a bag and you could feed them.
Nope.
So I was just sitting there and I was feeding these pigeons, and there are several pictures of me head to toe covered in pigeons. So when they put this up, they were like, we want people to review it. I was like, oh, absolutely. And I can speak from experience. The thing you got to worry about is less the beaks and more the wings, because those wings will come at you. And it was funny because when I finished, I was like, wow, that was amazing. And there's still a pigeon on my shoulder. And one of the guys that was working there, he was like, do you want me to get rid of that? I'm like, oh, and he goes, yeah, I guess she wants to come home with you. And I'm going, I'm sorry, bird, I can't. But you shoo them off, and that's what they did. They live in that park and they get fed. And I was like, that maybe that's why I was rooting for the birds towards the end of this.
They're friends.
Yeah, it's one thing when so my whole thing is pigeons are disgusting. They're literally like the aviary trash cans, right? Like barracudas are like that, right? Like of the sea. You have like squirrels that are like that on land. And then you have pigeons, which are like, they just eat fucking anything. And whenever there's like a huge like flock of pigeons, I'm like, I'm gonna die. Like it's done. Like I don't know. Like, sorry, I don't have a will. I don't know what's going on. But in this film, right? Like we have ravens, we have crows, we have all these birds, right? That are just like fucking attacking people for no reason, and we never learn why, right? Like we never learn like what's going on, which is why I think this film is probably one of the scariest Alfred Hitchcock films, right? Like it could happen, it might happen, right? And then we'll never know, right? And then
Mhm.
it spreads, right? And I think, Jen, like, you hit the nail on the head when you said it was based off of a book where it was like in Britain, right? Like,
Right.
and at the end of the book, like, the entire, like, birds have like, they've spread throughout
Mhm.
the entire country, and they're just attacking people, and people are like, we don't know what's going on, but we're dying, right? And so, you're like, what the fuck, right? And I feel like this is what happened at the end of this film. So here on Nom Watch Review, we like to rate these films out of popcorn buckets. And it's like a 0 to a 5. So let's talk about what we rated it. Let's go to you, Carolyn, first. What did you rate this film and why?
So my rating had nothing to do with performances, and everything to do with time, and everything to do with VFX, which is funny because when we bring up VFX, I have something to say about that. But I rated it 3.5, mostly because the tension really didn't build up for me until the very end. Like, the very end is really where things start to kick in a high gear, and it's like it has to end that way. And it leaves you wanting more, but there is no more because they're drifting off into the sunset, and that absolutely beautiful shot of all the birds staring at them as they leave, and it's, in black and white, so it's giving very Evil Dead, or not Evil Dead, it's giving very Night of the Living Dead, because all the birds are in black and white and they're watching them go, and you're like, oh, it's but so 3.5 is less because of the story and more the pacing. I wish it had kicked up to the tension a little earlier, and the VFX, which I feel like a little bit of a traitor saying this, but I wish the VFX did not hold up 100% for me. And I guess and that might be me being spoiled by a fan, but it was close to 4. It's like 3.599999999 1% off from 4.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jen, what did we rate this and why?
I gave it a 4.5. I hate to be a downer, but aside from my friend that was buried there, the friend that went with me on the road trip passed away just over a year ago, the one where we went to visit our other friends. So I think for me, there's a lot of like memories it brings up that are good memories, which is weird because I know what happens in the movie. And then, some of the behind the scenes stuff, like there's a lot of trivia about this movie that kind of gives it some layers. Of course, the VFX, yeah. And it is 2 hours long, which seems a little long, but
Mm.
it just depends on my mood when I watch it too. If I watch it and I'm like, I'm ready for this movie, then it just flies by. But if I if I'm just like, oh well, I'll watch this and I'm not really in that headspace, I'll pick it apart. I'll be like, oh, that's so crappy. But I'm like, this is 1963. Like,
Yeah.
so long ago. What am I expecting? But I give it a 4.5. I love Hitchcock. I love his movies. I'm from the Bay Area myself, now trapped in Inland Empire, but it's a very sentimental movie for me, and it's a fun movie if you can really lean into the campiness of some parts of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Mikey, what is your rating and why?
So I'm giving it a 4. I do enjoy. I think it's a little bit clouded with nostalgia for me because I do remember this movie and I look at it. It's like one of the first Hitchcock movies I've ever watched. So I like for me watching it again was like, oh, and it takes me back to like when I was discovering classic film for the first time. Aside from that, yes, the special effects don't really hold up. It does take a while to get going. But I kind of like push that aside and think, like this is one of the more, I guess it would be important. I could say important films in film
Mhm.
history. So for that reason, it held a high place in my listing for me. So, um, and as far as Hitchcock movies go, I think it's one of my like, top 3. So definitely
Yeah.
solid for me. And I don't think it's like a thing that'll ever change because even though I can point out the flaws now, I still have an affinity for it. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like one of those films when you watch it and you're like, I'm still kind of scared, but like I know what's coming and like it's good, right? And I think for me, so I gave it a 4 out of 5, only because um when I originally watched this, I was like, I am terrified of birds. Like, I don't want to see a fucking seagull in my line of sight ever again, right? And then when I go to the beach and there's like a fucking ton of them, I'm like, okay, like they're here, whatever. But I'm like, I don't want to see a seagull. I don't want to see a crow. I don't want to see a raven. I don't like. It's not like no. And I think the fact that this is a realistic thing that could happen, right? Like in the world, like birds can just fucking go crazy, right? Like little sparrows. Can you imagine? They're fucking right outside my window. Can you imagine if they just fucking like ate their way into my screen and then was like, "We're gonna kill you"? Like it could happen, right? Like it's a possibility, right? And I think with this film, right? Like the fact that it wasn't like there was nothing solved, right? Like it just ended, right? It was just like, oh, it's happening on the entire West Coast. And then it was like, what the fuck? Like you didn't give me a solution. You didn't give me any ending. And I feel like this is one of Hitchcock's best films, right? Is the fact that like if there's a horror film and there's no resolution, I'm scared. Like I'm not sleeping tonight. Like I'm not doing this, right? And I loved this film, right? Like for just the basic fact that like there was no sort of like it was like, oh, like Tippy Hedren is like, oh, I'm hurt. I'm hurt. Oh, and then it's like, but it's still going on. And then we're like, what the fuck? And then that's it, right? I loved it. I loved it for that. I loved the fact that it just was that. I think for me, I think I agree with all of your aspects where it was like it was a little corny, like at some points where I was like, did he get his eyes eaten out? Right? Like it was a little corny. It was a little just it was too campy at some points, but you have to remember this is the 1960s, right? Like everything that comes out is just campy, corny, all that stuff, right? I just want to say hi to Cue Ball. Cue Ball, hello, we love you. You're in the chat. He said my rating for this movie is 5 out of 5 buckets because it's Hitchcock. It's a horror classic. It's one of those movies where you know what to expect. Plus, Hitchcock's brilliance is shown through his dark and dry sense of humor, but it has a neutral pace and feel. I agree. Like this entire movie, it's like it works, right? Like it works in a way where it's like, yeah, like we can follow. Oh, okay. Oh, and then it's like it ends, and then we're like, we're not satisfied. I'm fine with that in a movie. I'm fine with being like, ooh, like it's not, it's not a thing, right? Like it's not something that I need solved, but it still is very irking, right? And that's what I loved about this film. So since we're on the topic of like visuals, right? Like clearly this is not the age of Avatar, right? Like clearly we're not getting like, ooh, let's put dots on our face and then we'll get birds, right? Like clearly this is not the age of, when we can see sort of like really good VFX or like any sort of visual effects that's going on. Let's talk about it. It really wasn't a thing for me when I was watching it. I was like, I get it. It's Hitchcock. Boom. Like I wasn't born in this era, but let me get my standards down to the point where I can totally feel it and be in the moment. Let's start with you, Mikey. What did you think about the VFX about the birds?
So when I was a kid, I thought like it would look pretty cheesy. I was like, wait a minute, what's all these like fake birds? Like attacking people. It didn't look right to me. And then I started learning more about VFX as I got older, and I got into film and stuff like that. And I learned how they did this stuff that they did. And at the time, a lot of it was kind of groundbreaking and stuff. So I forgive it for that. Like it's of its time, definitely, like you said, it's of its time. And then I don't know. I don't know to the fact that it doesn't hold up as far as like effects wise nowadays, if that's a big deal, because what Hitchcock does is like he's good at building suspense. He's good at telling a story about characters that that gets you involved in it and you're into the movie. And if he's doing that, then you don't really have to worry too much about the VFX not living up to your standards of modern day standards. You know what I mean? So as long as that still is the measuring bar for the movie, the suspense, if it keeps you, guessing on the edge of your seats, then I think that's fine. The effects, like I said, they're of its time and they're good for what they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Carolyn, what did you think about the effects? Just about the overall general look of the birds.
So when I say VFX and I say it doesn't hold up, I have to kind of take a small L for myself, because one of the people who because I did say it, but one of the people who did the VFX for it was the guy who designed Mickey Mouse with Walt Disney. Worked on the film using a technique that he developed while he was at Disney, using black and white colored film, ironically trying to make the birds' attacks look more authentic and real. He won an Oscar for this, so I have to stand by what I said, less because of the actual act, because yes, it was groundbreaking work, and I do love Abai Works. Like, he was an absolutely fascinating man. He was the guy that told Walt Disney to call himself Walt Disney instead of calling him Walter Diz. So at the very least, we love the guy for that, because that would just be the stupidest name. But my beef with the VFX was simply because I think I would have liked to have seen, and yes, I know it was 1963, but if they're willing to there's a couple of scenes in the film where you do have characters that are like truly viciously attacked. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that than just, there's blood on your face. There's fake blood on your face. But other than that, the film is absolutely gorgeous. It is beautifully shot. It is absolutely gorgeous. If you watch the 4K version, it's beautiful. It holds up 100% under the 4K. My issue is that the VFX don't hold up, and I will take my L. And sorry, up there. Sorry, Mr. Iworks, but and I would have just liked to have seen a little more visceral horror aspect to it. That's just me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It was still scary to me, right? Like, when I first saw it, it was still like, right? And I was definitely afraid of birds after that. And as I say, I look at my little bird feeder that's in my room, because I can't feed birds outside of my apartment complex because they just fucking fertilize the entire fucking dirt in front of my apartment. And my mom was like, "No, we're not having that." And I was like, "Okay." But they were so cute. They made a little nest, and it was so cute. Anyway, you're right. I would have loved to see more, but at the same time, I feel like at the age that I was when I saw this, I was like, if it's ketchup, I don't give a fucking fuck. Their eyes are pecked out. I'm like, I don't care. That is fucking scary, right? And I loved it, right? And I feel like, so here's the thing. I feel like Walt Diz is a little sexy name, and he was like, "Oh no, you need to be Walt Disney," and I was like, "Okay, right." Anyway, that's a side note. Jen, what did you feel like about the VFX of this film? What did you think about the birds being like caw and then being like, it's a little fake? What did you think?
So recently we were snowed in for a few days, and I feed the birds fairly regularly. And we have a small metal trash can I keep the bird seed in on the porch. They can't get in it, but apparently they know what's in there, because one of the days when I couldn't get out to their bird feeders because 4 feet of snow, I walked out on the porch and we were just throwing cupfuls of seed out there, and they still got it. There were little birdie footprints in the snow on top of the little trash can. They know it's in there. They were also birdie footprints by the hedge clippers that because we'd been doing yard work, and then the next day it snowed. So there's these big hedge clippers with little tiny bird prints all around it. And I'm pretty sure they were trying to figure out how to get in the trash can or get in at us. I'm not clear which they were aiming for. So I'm going to take my bird feeders down tomorrow and burn them. No. Birds are really interesting animals to watch. Oh, I'm sounding so old. I swear I'm not that old. They are really interesting to watch, though. I have multiple feeders outside. I live in the mountains. We get a variety of really beautiful birds, bright blue, bright red, all sorts of cool stuff. Their behavior is very interesting. And watching this movie, they did a good job with the footage capturing that type of behavior. You can tell when the birds are being aggressive. Again, depending on the mood I'm in, the schoolhouse scene terrifies me or makes me laugh. And my favorite scene in the whole movie, regardless of the VX, there's not even that many birds involved, is the gas station scene.
Yes.
Yeah. The gas station scene is probably my scariest, most anxiety ridden scene, because it's not the birds. It's just now at this point, the birds are bringing out this, we're trying to be safe from the birds, and then here's this guy outside and they try to stop him, but he can't really tell what's happening. And then there's a reason we don't smoke at the gas pump, sir. So that's my favorite scene. There's some rotoscoping, there's some effects that wouldn't fly. I gotta stop using that word. That wouldn't work today so much for the effects. It's very, it's very cheesy, but it fits the aesthetic of the movie. And if you can just let yourself go with it, it's perfect. Better effects would be it would ruin it. It's just, I think the way it is, it all works together very well for the time period, for the aesthetic of the movie, and the slightly cheeky cheesiness of it. So it works for me. It works for me, at least.
So Cue Ball redeemed hydrate, so everybody drink whatever you're drinking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I don't want any more.
Yes, thank you.
And then Wyatt Paints redeemed, you're so punny. He says, whoever got the goods, give me a pun that would make the penguins smile.
Ooh, all right.
Oh, there goes Carolyn. Good job, Carolyn. Go.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I could come up with something on the fly, but that would be hard to. I guess I got nothing. I got to lose the feather in my cap, No, nothing.
Yes.
Okay, good, because I created that one on a wing and a prayer. Come on.
There you go.
Come on.
Keep it going.
Don't count your chickens before they hatch.
Look.
Oh, you know what, Jennifer?
Don't put all your eggs in one basket, Carolyn.
I'm sending you all my bill for therapy. That's what's happening.
Your bill.
My bill. I'm sending you all my bill for therapy. That's right, because when I throw those puns, you better duck. That's just what I do.
Do we have rim shot effects in here? We can just hit that every time? I mean, that's great.
Wait, can I do the hair? Oh.
Yes. Cue Ball says the practical effects were literally practical and really useful through the film. If you think about it, from Jen's point earlier, the movie was based on a dark poem. You can tell that the movie has a great pace and the feel of a dark Gothic story style poem. I love Gothic poetry. And then Wyatt Payne says, boom goes the dynamite. We hit the puns. We love everybody. And Cue Ball goes, yay. And Heartless goes, good one. So we did a good job, guys. We're done. That's all the time. No, I'm just kidding. Imagine. Oh my God. That's all the time we have for fucking Nom Talk ever. Anyway, so let's talk about the casting, right? Let's talk about Tippi Hedren. Oh my God. What was his name? I'm so mad. Rod Taylor. Excuse me. Cute, little sexy Rod Taylor. And then Jessica Tandy, right? We have these people that at the time, and if you hadn't thought in the beginning, this was Tippi Hedren's first movie, like big movie that she did, right? And Rod Taylor had already been established, like he was like fucking doing films like crazy and doing all this stuff. I absolutely loved the acting, right? Like, and especially for films that were like in the 60s, 50s, like 70s, like, yeah, you had this like dramatic flair to it, but I feel like it was, I don't know. I always watch films that are like current, and I'm like, oh, cool. Like, it's believable. And then I watch films that are like in the 60s, and I'm like, yes, I want dramatic. I want just over the top. I want all of this. And I was like, yes. And I loved this film for that, right? Like, I loved the fact that, like, it added to it. It didn't really like take away from it, right? Like, even when you had like the gas station scene, right? Like, you had the scene where, Rod Taylor's sister like got killed by the birds, right? And you're like, you feel it. You're like, it's an emotion. Like, it's not drawn out, right? Like, it's not like you get to learn to love this character and then they're like, die, right? You're like, oh, it was quick. Oh, it was quick here. Oh, it was quick here. Oh shit, she's dead. And then you're like, oh, this is terrible. Oh shit, how are they going to survive, right? And I loved the fact that like these movies around this time represented that. Carolyn, let's start with you. What did you think of the casting? What did you think of the acting throughout this film?
I have thoughts. I'm going to be as brief as I can. There is an underlying theme of stranger in a strange land, strange creatures introduced to an unusual environment, and they cast it perfectly with Tippi Hedren as this beautiful, gorgeous socialite. And because she's absolutely fantastic looking and she's shot so beautifully.
Yeah.
And then you have Mitch Brenner, you have and then you have the sister and you have the mom, and she goes to the island and everything's very drab and everything is very gray and all the characters are very gray, but she's this gorgeous and beautiful socialite and she's very soft spoken, but she's still strong. And everybody, even towards the end, people are there's that woman in the diner, she's just like, who are you, what are you? And it's this real underlying theme of classism, versus not gentrification, but like people like stranger in a strange land kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it wouldn't have worked without Tippi Hedren being so beautiful, and like, so it almost had this very like old school movie, like woman moves out to the prairie and it's very different, and then she kind of like does things out there, and it really relied on her being seemingly very soft spoken but very hardcore underneath. But the real talent was in the side characters, Mitch, his mom, and then the subtle story that you had there, and then like it just played so much with different kinds of people, but you had to have the actors that they casted. The casting was phenomenal. I really liked it. And you had to cast people like that because there's some underlying themes there that I don't know if I was just reading too deep into it, but I read too deep maybe, and it was just really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, it was definitely a good casting choice. And I feel like I don't know. I feel like if it was anybody else, it wouldn't have gotten delivered the way that it did, right? Like I wouldn't have been scared as a kid watching this, right? Like, because like as a kid, like there was so much more scarier things that were out, right? Like, but my parents had introduced me to shit that like I had never seen, and they were like, "Yeah, this came out like when I was a kid, blah blah blah," and I was like, "Okay," and then I watched it, and I was like, right? Um, and I feel like this is one of those films, that like without this casting, it wouldn't have had the same effect. Jen, what do you think about the casting?
I love the casting. I mean, Suzanne Plachette plays the teacher. She's a legend.
Mm-hmm,
And then the little sister is Veronica Cartwright, who was an Alien and a
mm-hmm.
million other things. I was actually just looking up her IMDb because I'm like, I know she was in something really scary when she was younger, but she's been in so many things. Like Veronica Cartwright is one of those, hey, that's that lady from The Thing, one of those faces. And she's been acting forever because I think she's still actually acting. And yeah, I know we could talk about we probably do a whole hour on Tippi Hedren. Her look, her mannerism, she is that kind of not naive. She's clueless to everything around her because she's been in this bubble of privilege. She's a little socialite. She thinks it's perfectly fine to go to this coastal town, which is a fishing town and a small tourist, but it's not a fancy beach town. She's not going to Malibu. She's not going to Laguna Niguel. And she's in her, I'm going to go over here in my fancy convertible with my pretty dress and my perfectly done hair, my mink coat. And then I'm going to take a rowboat across the bay. And she just is so like, well, I'm just going to do this because I can.
Breaks into the man's house. She breaks into his house.
It seemed to have been unlocked. So she let herself in. She's a little Goldilocks and the Three Bears kind of thing going on here. But I know one of the themes of the story, the book, was you can't control everything. And sometimes things are going to be so far out of your control that you just have to go with it. And to me, there's actually a line in the book where because it's set in England, where they talk about the Americans are our allies. They're going to come save us. And since the book was written not long after World War II ended, I feel like that was kind of a commentary on how America kind of held back entering the war and you were left to your own devices waiting for someone to come rescue you is another theme of this. And like the end of it, are they going to get rescued? Are those birds going to eat them? I'm sure the birds ate them, but nobody was coming for you. No, the casting though, as I completely derail myself from my squirrel brain, all across the board. I mean, it's just a classic who's who of that time period. Yeah. It really is. And then they have some great, I love the postmaster. What's her name? Is it Lois? No, I don't think it's Lois when they're going back and forth on the little girl's name, and they're completely wrong. They're completely wrong. So, they cast the roles really well. And I think Hitchcock he had good people doing that for him, and he had a knack for that.
Yeah, I love that. What I don't love is that Heartless 7 redeemed talk in third person, starting with Jordyn. Damn it! I know who this is, and I'm so mad at you. So, Jordyn thinks that Mikey should talk about how he thinks that the casting went and how Jordyn agrees with the last two about it's great. It's the casting was great. Mikey, what do you think about the casting? And don't forget to talk in third person.
Well, Mikey's not very happy about that, but he will oblige. He believes that the casting of Tippi Hedren was right on the nose. It was great. And she's got such a presence on screen that you can't help but want to know more about her. Not just her character, but her. So after I went not even last night, but years ago, I went down a rabbit hole Mikey went down a rabbit hole trying to figure out what her history was, how she ended up in Hollywood and stuff. And she was discovered on a commercial by Hitchcock.
Yep.
And this is her first movie, and I was like, oh my god. And Mikey was just amazed by how well she played this part. Rod Taylor was also very good. I got the sense of him as the good looking, well off kind of guy that kind of is put in a situation where if I think about it, he wouldn't make it out. He needs her. As big and burly as he looks.
Excuse me, he's hot. He'd make it out.
He wouldn't. No, he'd be the pretty girl that dies. You know what I'm saying?
So he's the final girl.
Yeah.
Big himbo energy. Big himbo energy.
Definitely. Yeah. And then I think everybody touched on this too. The townspeople are amazing. They're I love the scene in the diner outside the garage, outside the gas station, when they're all just there's the mom that's worried about the children,
Mm.
People's voices down, you're scaring the children, and like then the know-it-all bird lady who comes in and starts spouting off facts, and then the captain who comes in and talks about the gulls attacking his ship, and he's like, well, they did attack my ship, but I don't know if I believe the fact that, like it's just they all have a unique story themselves. They feel like real characters in that
Mm.
town. And I think
Mm.
that's a great job in casting realish people, you know what I mean? Like actors that feel like real people that can play the parts of regular town folk. Like if it was like Tippi Hedren totally feels like a fish out of water in this because she is this big glamorous model,
Yeah.
coming into this
Yeah.
town of kind of like, oh yeah, we're fishermen here, we're farmers, and you buy it. And so it's great casting all around.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with this casting. As a closeted little gay boy, when I first saw this, I was like, who's Rod Taylor? Like, why is he cute? Right? Like, I'm like just watching it and I'm like, what the fuck's going on? And then like Tippi Hedren, right? I'm like, you're a beautiful woman. Like, you got all this like fashion, you got like all this stuff going on. And then like you get past that and you're like, oh, these fucking like aviary fucking monsters are attacking you. Like, fuck that. Like, it doesn't matter how good you look, right? Like, you're gonna fucking die,
Yeah,
right? And I appreciated this film specifically for that.
Yes.
And Cue Ball Redeem suggests a poll: which horror gothic icon works do you identify with the most? He said Hitchcock or Edgar Allan Poe. I love this, and I'm not going to answer, but let's go to Mike. What do you identify with, Hitchcock or Edgar Allan Poe?
Hitchcock, because I think his horror movies are more suspenseful. They're
Love
more
it.
modern, whereas
Yeah.
Poe is more, I feel it's very gothy, and I'm not really gothy. I'm not a gothy kind of person, so I identify more with Hitchcock for sure.
Yeah, no My Chemical Romance for you. Got it.
I mean, back in the day maybe, but not now.
And Jen, do you identify with Hitchcock or Edgar Allan Poe?
Oh, I'm.
Are you torn?
I am, because I agree Hitchcock's more modern. A lot of his stuff is set where in my old stomping grounds, but man, there's people I'd love to wall up in a basement with a cask.
Oh my God.
I do love a black cat now and then, not to kill me, but I don't want to say I identify with Poe because I feel like that means I should get to the therapist quickly. But I think overall, if you sat me down and said, read these works by Poe or watch Psycho and the Birds, I'd probably read the book.
Yeah.
Because I was an English major and I do love Poe and I love kind of digging into the symbolism and stuff.
Love it. Carolyn, what are your thoughts?
Can I cheat and say Hitchcock adapting the works of Edgar Allan Poe? No, okay. I was just like, I would love to see Hitchcock's take on a modern version of Mask of the Red Death. I think that would be really, really good. Yeah, I gotta say, based on my own personal aesthetics and everything else, well, I think Poe is a little scarier. I have to say Hitchcock. I mean, when you have the classic Hollywood mixed in with the suspense, and by the end of the Birds, there is a lot of suspense. Like, you are genuinely tense, and it's real tension. It's not manufactured Blumhouse. Sorry, Blumhouse, I love you to pieces.
No.
It is manufactured tension where you're waiting for a jump scare. It is genuine, like something's gonna pop out at you from behind you. And all I wish truly is that the Alfred Hitchcock behind you in your thing could come to life, Mr. Hitchcock, and just adapt a Poe work. Can you imagine Hitchcock adapting Cast of Montedello or Fall of the House of Usher? Or no,
he kind of did The Raven.
Yeah,
he did.
Lots of them. He just called it The Birds.
Quote the Raven.
Nevermore.
Nevermore.
That was the cut ending. Tippi Hedren just muttering "Nevermore, nevermore" over and over.
I love it. So for me, look, my favorite horror author person of all time is H.P. Lovecraft. And he got a lot of his influences from Edgar Allan Poe. So I'm a Poe bitch. Like I am a Poe bitch. Like if
I
somebody
want that on a T-shirt for you.
Yeah.
No,
Poe
please
bitch.
make it because I'm a
That should be your
bitch.
Instagram, Poe bitch.
Yes, yes. Oh my god, I'm gonna change it. It's not gonna be City Stars anymore. It's gonna be like I'm a Poe bitch.
Yep.
And the only reason is because like the depth of like cosmic horror and all of that like comes from Edgar Allan Poe, and I love it. But I do love a Hitchcock fucking film, right? Like you don't know where it's going. Like if you haven't seen one and you haven't seen a Hitchcock film, like if it's The Birds, if it's Vertigo, if it's anything, and you haven't seen it, you don't know what angle like is going to happen until you watch it. And that's what I love about Hitchcock, right? Like you have all of these things that happen in one film. And it's the same thing with The Birds, right? Like you don't know that at the end, spoiler alert, you don't know that it's not going to have an ending, right? Like it's like, oh, it's continuous. And then it's like, it ends. And then you're like, what the fuck? Like, no, like, I don't want to get attacked by a bird, right? Like, you don't know that, like, Psycho, right? Like, that, like, it just doesn't end. It, like, continues. And you're like, well, what's going on? Are you crazy? Like, what's, like, what? Right? And I feel like with Hitchcock, like with any Hitchcock film, right? Like, he had such a knack for being like, this is the end, but it's not. And it was great. It was amazing. And I loved it. I loved The Birds. Let's talk about final thoughts before we end this stream. Let's go to you, Mikey. Any last minute thoughts about The Birds?
Well, I thought it's a movie that holds up. Despite the special effects and everything like that, the story itself holds up. And I think part of the reason why Hitchcock is so good is that he crafts a story where you could see yourself in it. You know what? You put yourself in that position and you can see yourself and you can wonder, what would I do here? How would I get out of this? And I think that's the beauty of the Hitchcock movies is that it builds suspense and you're on the edge of your seat because you're worried about yourself. How would you do this? How would you solve this problem and get out of this situation or whatever, or solve this mystery, whatever. But it's a classic movie that holds up, and I think it's a movie that'll be studied for quite a long time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Jen, any last minute thoughts about the Birds?
No, I feel like we hit on all the key points of it. It's a classic movie. He is the master of suspense, unrivaled, in my opinion, still, except for maybe Silence of the Lambs, because that one still 300 viewings later. No. The click of the goggles will kill me.
Don't talk about it.
So, but when I was there and I was in front of the museum that was the schoolhouse in the movie, I was looking at the trees because there's lots of trees. What lives in trees? Birds. So I was looking around and I'm like, if I had a path, I had a plan back to the car. It gets in your head. I'm like, okay, I can outrun them. It's not that far. So it gets in your head, especially like being there in the moment. And I know when I do watch it, I look at the birds outside a little differently for a bit. And if you go to Disneyland regularly around sunset, the birds start circling and it freaks some people out. I love it. I'm like, ooh, friends. But yeah. No,
I'm like, oh, not friends.
No, is that when you go inside? That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. I think it's cool to watch, and it's cool to watch the people get a little freaked out by it. But no, it's definitely a movie that builds the suspense, makes you think, and kind of makes you a little more aware of nature around you, because it turns on you, right? It could turn on you at any time. Yep. So yeah.
Awesome. And Carolyn, any last minute thoughts on the birds?
So apart from my never-ending quest to tie everything into Disney and realizing that yes, this too ties into Disney. This my never-ending my raison d'etre. No, I think that this is a great introduction for people to horror films and to Hitchcock. I think if you can handle this and you're interested by it, then that's when you go and you look for Psycho and you look for other things. People will say start with Psycho. No, start with this one because it's the tension at the end that really gets you, because it's so well done as they're creeping out to the car, and there's no music, there's no score. It's just human beings and nature. And the strength of Hitchcock is not in his story. It's in his storytelling, yeah, but it's in the way that he uses film to impress upon you visceral worry, and in many cases, visceral terror. And when I'm watching it, I was watching it, on my computer. I was, sitting there taking notes, and towards the end, I was just like, my heart is hammering. I'm inside. I'm not feeding birds. I'm not surrounded by pigeons or ducks. Because, I've just had so many strange encounters with birds in my life, apparently, which this brought up in my life. I kicked a duck once. That's the...
Did it deserve it? It probably did.
All ducks deserve it.
Probably did.
She did. She
Okay.
was a she. So I think that it's the tension that he builds. It's a great introduction. If you're looking for a movie to start you on a horror path, or you're looking for an intro to Hitchcock, watch this one and then build up to the more hardcore stuff, because this one's, I think, as important as Psycho in terms of his catalog.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, y'all, it's been an amazing adventure. We have flown, flied, and just had a wonderful time in the air with this film. And I'm so happy to see you all. I'm so sad I didn't get to see you all at WonderCon. But thank you so much to my wonderful guests, Carolyn, Mikey, and Jennifer. Let's start out with Carolyn. Where can we find you on the socials?
So until something happens with the Twitters, you can find me at my name and then fandom with a capital F on Twitter. Please follow me. Please consider following me. I'm also Carolyn's Geek Out on Instagram, and those are the two best places you can reach me at the moment. Hashtag keep TikTok, because I want to make sure we
Absolutely. Yeah, fuck yeah. Let's not ban TikTok. Mikey, where can we find you, man? What's going on?
GripC47 on Instagram and Twitter and basically all socials. And I'll be looking for Po Bitch pretty soon, so I'll be rooting for that. I'm signing up first time I see that name. I'm adding that name.
I'm gonna fucking do it tomorrow. I'm just gonna create it.
I'm gonna check.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what? Okay. I'm gonna be Po Bitch. That's right. That's what's going on. Jen, where can we find you on these socials?
I am on Instagram, do_as_Peggy says, and I am also the newly minted California commander of the West Coast Avengers chapter of the Avengers Initiative Service Group.
Whoa!
And you can find us on Instagram at California Avengers and follow our con adventures and our service adventures as we start back up visiting kids, and we're going to make some smiles at Shriners in a couple weeks.
That's great work. That's awesome.
I love that.
Yeah.
I want to dress up as Scarlet Witch and be like, "Hi, everyone. I love you." Thank you so much for what you do, Jen. And yes, absolutely. Please follow all these wonderful individuals. Please do, because they're doing so much amazing work, better than I'm doing. And they're just like around doing it, all that stuff. I'm at City of Stars 13 on Instagram. Soon to be Po Bitches.
Yeah.
And so look out for that. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to join our Discord to keep the conversation going, as well as subscribing to all of our platforms, which are at Nom Talk Network. Tune in to our next show, which is going to be on Friday. It's going to be Basic Binges. with our host, Mike Manalo, who's fucking amazing, doing so many amazing things, doing The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 5. So if you haven't freaking seen it, watch it. Please watch it. With guests Michael Flores and William Ellis. We all love you. Until then, have a nomorific evening. We all love you. Thank you for sending your suggestions. And please keep doing it. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.